Okay, hi everyone. Very nice to see you all here again. This is RSM Playtime number 3. And today I don't really have any content prepared other than what we did last week, which I think was quite good, as in following the instinct and whatever interests you as app developers, because for me, like myself, I'm often find myself in a situation which I assume that some things are already known, but they are not, because it's already familiar for me, but it's not for people. So I find it difficult to find those blind spots, and having it be really a discussion and hey, I want to go into this path or whatever is much more valuable, I think. So from that, yeah, first of all, maybe it's interesting to see any reactions, any comments, any questions from last week's RSM Playtime. Also, if you have done some experimentation around it, are there some initial thoughts or things anyone would like to ask? If not, I want to do a check-in, which is here is I feel like I understand a very large amount of what RSM is and how it affects everything. And this is nope, no idea yet, just getting started. Where is everyone at? Yeah. Okay.
I would say conceptually, I think it's becoming clearer, like what the shifts are, at a more abstract level. But I think, yeah, breaking it down and diving into some of the issues, like last week we dived into the issue of updating and editing. I think that would be helpful. Issues like that, or diving into shifts like that, would be very helpful.
Right. Okay. So is there any topic that you want me to go into detail about? Otherwise, I think there is a good starting point, which is how validation will work, because it's a little different in RSM than in previous versions, and also how that relates to link definitions and so on. So maybe we can use that as starting point. What? Go.
It's a great starting point.
Well, I can understand you. It's weird. You had like a
Static. Try again. Mm.
Can you hear me now?
Microphone as a noise.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie.
yeah.
But I guess what you're saying is that validation is a good place to start. Um, I can just add, I guess related to that will be that whole thing of concurrent workflows and local first, and I guess that will be related to validation,
Mm-hmm.
because that would be interesting to, because I feel like that is one big black box for me right now, and so to unpack that would be fun as well.
Huh. Yeah. Actually, that part, like I have some information on that part, but I don't have the complete picture. But we can explore what the picture I know is, and what we could dive deeply in following sessions. So okay, let me get the examples. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let me share the screen. Okay, can you see my screen? Yeah, perfect. So yeah, perfect. I'm just using the examples from the test utils crates that you can find in the Holochain main repository, which serve as a living sample for different parts, different callbacks, different calls that you can do in RSM. Also, it's using for continuous integration. It's executing the test with this code. So, okay, I'm now looking at a piece of 𝗔𝗯cie code, and specifically, I want to look at this validate callback, right? So, and I'm just using this topic as a conversation starter because I think it's important to think about how validation will work a little bit in depth. And yeah, also, it's a good starting point to branch off of. So, okay, here we have a validate function. So first of all, notice that this is not tied to the entry definition. So the entry definitions are here. These are expanded, but really what you have to do is like HDK entry, and that's it. And the validate callback is totally separated from that. And that is because of some reasons. So first of all, you can see that this validate function, this validate callback, doesn't have any, isn't tied to any specific entry, because this validate callback will be called at any point in which an entry is committed, no matter the type of the entry. So here, what they are doing actually is saying, okay, if the entry is of this type, then it always validates. If the entry is of this type, then it never validates. This is just a very, very silly example to give an example, yeah, of let's say big generic validate function. So what you can also do is, and now I'm realizing I need to open this in the code because it will be much easier for me to edit. Sorry. Okay. Perfect. So this is the exact same code. I'm just opening it from my IDE. So what you will be able to do also is do things like HDK extern function validate create, oops, sorry, validate entry, create post. Okay, with the same signature. Oops. Okay, and this will be executed when you are creating an entry of type post. Okay, so the entry definitions have an entry ID, which is what you do when you do, I don't want to show you in that project. I want to show you in this project. Sorry for jumping a little bit around. I think this is all I should need. So here I have defined a calendar event. So if you notice, this HDK entry accepts an ID. This is what previously was known as entry type. So now we have the ID of this type, which is calendar event, and this is going to be matched against this ID here. Right. So if the ID of the entry matches this ID here, this is going to be executed whenever this type of entry is created. And you can also do things like validate entry update post and validate entry delete post. And how are these three calls interact? You may be asking yourself, because you may find it like conflicting. But does this validate function, is this validate function going to be executed, or are these more concrete? So basically, it works in a cascade type thing. In this case, all of them are going to be executed. First, the more specific functions are going to be executed. And if this validates, okay, then we are going to the next validate callback. And then this is going to be executed. So you can think of, like, now we have a more flexible way of defining validations in which you can say, okay, for example, I don't want to validate any entry that's bigger than 10K, for example. In here, like I can code that here, entries more than 10K. And now in each one of the entries, I can say, okay, these are the rules for this specific entry not to pass. But if this concrete entry is bigger than 10K, it's not going to pass because this is going to be executed as well. And yeah, so this is for the entries. Everything good so far? Yes.
Oh, how validate entry create post connected? What is the connection point?
Right. The connection point is actually matching the name. So Holochain has this grammar for callbacks now, which is there will be a bunch of callback that you can define in a Holochain application. And if the name of the function matches what Holochain is expecting, then Holochain will treat that function with the appropriate functionality. So for example, if I say validate, this is not going to be executed.
What is the convention naming?
For now, I think it's this validate entry, create, so the action, create, update, delete, post, which is the entry ID.
It means in your case, it's going to be validate entry, create, calendar underline event.
Exactly right, yeah. Yeah. And this is actually the same, like this is one of the things I wanted to discuss because it's a big shift on how we were doing things before. This is the same with things like post commit. So we now have post commit, which is a callback that it's going to be executed after any one entry gets committed, and this is going to receive a vector of headers, basically, a vector of elements, sorry, I think. And it's the name that's doing the matching. So if it's this post commit, this means nothing to Holochain. Holochain will interpret this as, okay, this is a function that, this is a some function that I, from the UI you should be able to call. Okay, so it really makes, the name is really what makes the difference here. Of course, if you don't have HDK extern, you can name your functions whatever you want, that they are not going to be executed. And things that
again
we are
here post commit under,
yeah, go
again here post commit underline calendar underline event. Yeah, again
no
it means
no
action
no
underline.
no. This grammar validate validate entry underline create, but it's only for validation. The other ones are going to be static, as far as I know. Like maybe they will add some new callback with a grammar that contains the entry ID, but right now I don't think so.
So how the post commit understand which entry, how it's calling for which entry if you have a 10 entry?
You have to filter this. So elements, I don't know, either filter and then for each element you can do the entry, and then
Switch
you
this
can do
inside.
try into, try into whatever the entry is. For example, here is this was an entry, always validates, I think. So you can match basically, yeah.
So in validate entry, validate update create, if I would have a two, if there would be two function, the same one, because you mentioned it's going to be cascade. What does it mean cascade? It means can I have more than one validate update entry?
No, because this will force you to write two functions with the same name with HDK extern, and this is invalid.
Okay.
You cannot do that.
And the order is, first of all, it is the main validate this one, or at first this one, then the main validate?
I think the specifics are first and then the other is second, but it really makes no difference because both validation functions should return valid for the entry to be valid. So it's not this or this. No. Every function should return valid. Otherwise, it's not valid.
And post commit is after transaction, or it is inside transaction?
Yeah, the thing about post commit, like post commit is in this shape for a reason, which is this is not executed after every create of the entry. So, for example, here, imagine this is the zone function, right? And I have a bunch of commits. Okay. This post commit is not executed after each one. It's executed after the whole zone function is executed, and as so is receiving all the elements that were created in this zone function. And why does this exist? First place, because in the post commit function you can do things that you don't need the UI to wait for. So imagine I want, for example, after every commit, I want to send all the entries to an indexing node, or say, look for the entries if there is something that I should duplicate in my other device, or whatever it is. I don't really want the UI to be waiting for this to complete before returning. Right? So the zone function returns and the post commit is not executed. It's only executed after a little bit of processing, like what do these elements generate as the HTOPs and things like that, and then the post commit is executed. So in the post commit, you can do things like, the indexing example, I think, is a very good one, which is whatever the entry contains as text, just index every entry to this indexing node. We are going to have many of these, like app install, like don't rely on the names, but just on the concepts, like app install, basically init, which is first when the app is installed and you're joining the network. Also things like I don't know exactly how it will be called, but it's something like awake when the conductor goes offline. Online after being online, and also shutdown. So again, the exact list and names of the callbacks have not been decided exactly yet. Things like post-commit exist, but the other ones, I haven't seen them, so I don't think they exist yet. But just take into account that we are going to have all these options, callbacks that we can use to do many kinds of processes that were really difficult to do before.
Can you share the example of the more generic and then specific validation of the 10 KB versus more specific validation? Like what kind of what kind of utility would that?
Right.
Like I'm guessing like we could have one generic thing like all tweets can't be more than 300 characters, and then have specific validation for within tweets or something like that.
That example, maybe it's not the best fit, because in this case, I think the tweets are all going to be of the same entry type.
Yeah.
So in reality, I think that this generic function, it's mostly going to be used in edge cases, and these ones are going to be the ones that we're going to use the most. But here, which is I think that's interesting, is that here what you get is an element. It's not the entry. So now in RSM, you're validating elements, not the entry. That the element is invalid doesn't mean that another element with the same entry is valid, which means that that entry can be valid at the end of the day. And in here, you can do any validation with headers, because headers are the same for all the entries, right? So you can say things like, okay, I don't know, this is very edge casey, but let's validate that the timestamp of this header has not gone before everyone else in the network by some amount of time. I don't know, like it's difficult for me to come up with good generic header validations, because a lot of those are already done in the subconscious of Holochain, like signature, header signature is done on subconscious. Also that you cannot go back in the timestamp of your own headers, that's done on the subconscious. The last header hash is also done on the subconscious. So here, yeah, like the more reasonable example I can think of is a file storage zone or something like that, in which you have different entry types for each of the types of file you want to be storing. And you say, okay, any one of those files cannot be bigger than 10K or something like this.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, welcome.
I'm also trying to think of examples.
Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I wanted to say that maybe something related to voting or bidding might be an example here. So let's say you say that bidding for anything in the application starts on Friday night, and then you can generically validate that no entry would be created before this timestamp. I mean, before a certain timestamp. So is this a valid example, or am I missing something?
Yeah, that would be a valid example. Like another, like I don't know exactly if we were going to design that application that we're going to do it like that, but that would be the sort of thing. But well, you'll know that validation rules with timestamps, you have to be a little careful with that. So yeah.
So can we ignore and delete this validate generic one? Do not
Yeah, absolutely. If it's not there, Holochain will say this is valid.
But only if you have these specific validate functions defined for all your entry types, right? Or
No,
would it...
not necessarily. This means that any entry is valid.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah, and actually, if you have seen any zone of RSM up until now, very few of people outside the core dev are doing validation already. Because actually the validation workflows and polishments and so on are still being merged. So maybe some types or some names are going to change at the last minute. So me, for example, I haven't done any validation for that reason.
Is there any effort that to go for another approach like attribute or something like that instead of naming convention? Or do you know anything about?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah, like you mean something like you have validate and then you have like entry ID here or something like that. Oops.
Or anything rather than going to the naming convention.
You don't like naming convention, I assume.
Generally, I don't think
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
It's a good approach.
Yeah. I don't think there's much there, unfortunately. Well, unfortunately, I mean, these naming conventions do give us some flexibility when thinking about developing a mixing library that you then want to include in your zone. Like you can do more things that way. I think, but I see your point. I see your point. Maybe this is all David Meister's area of expertise, so I can ask him and see what's the future of this.
Yeah.
Okay, so last thing about validation, maybe I can show you how validate links looks, which is here. And if you remember, I think we said this last time, or I don't know if last time, but sometime. So, right, okay, perfect. So links are not defined per se. Like in the previous version of Holochain, you had to statically define links between any two entry types, but you couldn't do a link. You couldn't actually create a link if there was not a static link type defined between the two entries you're trying to link. Like, for example, I say here is the tweet type and it has no links. And if there is another zone, which is here is the post type and it has no links, another zone cannot come and say, let's link a post to a tweet. You couldn't do that, right? Because the entry definitions kind of lock you in the links that that entry wanted to be part of. But now links are all dynamically created, so you don't have any way to define static links, which has some pros and some cons. The pros, I think, are really good, which are now you can create a new third zone that links any of the entries of the other zones, and that's perfectly fine. That's cool. It also solves a lot of problems. Like there is a very good forum thread initiated by Postpe, I think, and also Paul Daust, that explains how link types in the previous version of Holochain had some problems when it came to modularity and stitching zones together, and this approach absolutely goes away with that. So with that, the thing is that now you cannot say things like validate create link from post to tweet, because this really doesn't exist as far as Holochain knows, right? So the best thing that you can do is to validate create link, and any link that's created is going to be executed here, right? So if you want to enforce that only links from this entry to this entry are valid, you have to do it explicitly here. Like, it's not the work of the subconscious anymore to do that for you. So now you can have much more flexible structures if you want. Like, you can say, okay, any entry can have links. Like, I'm building a tags zone, a tagging zone, and I want to, for any entry to be able to be tagged, and the tag entry can have links to any entry. Okay, this we had in the previous version, but any entry can have links to the tags. It's tag. It's only with this with RSM that's possible. I don't know if I made a lot of sense there, but I try to convey it. And I think this requests a question maybe, which is, okay, but if I'm linking two entries or whatever from different zones, but the links, I'm creating the links in this zone, okay, there is only one validate create link function in this zone, but other zones will have a validate create link function also. Which one is going to be executed? The answer is always the validate function of the zone you have created your entry or your link in. Okay, so if I'm creating the link in this zone, this is the one that's going to be executed. If I'm creating the link in another zone, even if it's linking from an entry defined in this zone, it's going to be executing on that zone. Okay. If you want to change this a little bit, what you could do is say, okay, validate create link here, and I'm going to call another function from another zone, right? So this we can do always. We can bridge between DNAs, but we can also do cross-zone functions, which are the smaller version of bridge, I guess. And you can say things like, okay, this link is only valid if the base entry is valid, for example, or if the base entry has some properties. And now I can call, I can call the other zone in which this base entry is defined, whatever function I want from there, and it's going to be to return the result and finish the validation, basically. And here we see the same convention: validate create link, validate delete link. Where is it? Validate delete link. Links cannot be updated. Yeah, I think this is it for now and for validation. I think as everything in RSM, like, everything is following more or less the same principle, which is give more flexibility to the app developers and don't assume the way that they want to do things. But this means that maybe some built-in things that we had before, we don't have them anymore. We have to check the entries ourselves if we want to limit the links from entries to entries. So we have more responsibility and more freedom as well. How am I doing? Is this being understood? am I a little boring? Any other topics I should drill into or comment on?
I have a question.
Sure.
So let's say I have a zone and in it I have an entry and I wish to restrict that my entry is not to be linked outside from other zones. So if there would be another zone that I'm taking into my application, and this zone would be trying to create links from my entry in the first zone, then I would have to modify the validation of the links in the second zone in order to restrict. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. In a way, zones cannot zones are unenclosable from each other in the sense that they cannot violently repress the actions from other zones. I don't know.
Yeah, sounds good.
This might be a basic question. Sorry, go ahead.
Go, Sid.
Mine was a little basic question. Like, I have not understood the original problem that you said 𝗏𝗏 raised. Like, what was the issue that you said got addressed by this?
Right. So let's say that, yeah, I think. Okay. I think I can even do an REA example. So let's say I have the planning and the observation zones. I think those are real zones, right? And let's say that I want them to be developed independent of each other, like in a modular fashion in which they don't, neither one depends on the other, right? So I can have a planning zone standalone, and I can have an observation zone standalone in some application. But sometimes I want to have them both, and I want to link from an entry of one to the other, right? Okay, so in the previous version, there was no way to do that because the entry definitions of the either one of the zones, to be able to link, you had to explicitly say, hey, this entry can go to this other entry. And this would create the dependency automatically, right?
Yeah.
So now what you can do is planning and observation independent, and then add a new third zone that says, okay, this is going to control the links from this to this. I don't know if this makes sense from the for the HoloREA architecture, but for other,
because in my head I'm like, if you wanted to make links, why not just specify it, right? But I guess this just removes that dependency completely.
Right. So there is,
like, I understand you'd have to go back and edit the planning and observation zone.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there is a pattern I really like about doing working with Holochain, and not only Holochain, but content addressable systems, which is, if you consider that everything in the world, like any data, can be hashed, but this hash becomes a uniquely identifier of the data without any sort of collision, and it's like a global namespace for all the data in the world. So you can do things like okay, here is a zone that can tag any data in the world, because I can just say tag this hash, and now there is a bidirectional link between the tag and the entry of the hash. And no matter what zone I put besides the tagging zone, everything will be able to be tagged. So, and you can think of, okay, I can tag any piece of data. I can reply to any piece of data. So comments, I want to do a comments module not so far out, that you will be able to say comment on a calendar event, comment on a pull request, comment on whatever, and it's just referring to the hash. And there is no conflict possible, because the hashing mechanism prevents any sort of collision between the data. Like, you don't have to be thinking, okay, this is a comment that refers to the profile type of this database ID for. No, all of that is already encoded into hashes.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the link is kind of entry, or it is totally headers. What kind of things as a data?
Yeah. So I think we covered some of this last time, but I think it's worth it to go back. So let's go to this. Where are headers? A header. Okay, so links have two dedicated headers, which are create links and delete links. Sorry, there are two dedicated header types for links, create link and delete link. And create link has already all the information about the link and doesn't have an entry. Okay, so this header already says base address, target address, 𝗔𝗯ID tag. This 𝗔𝗯 ID is necessary for the validator's node, the validator nodes to be able to execute the correct validation function. Because if I'm receiving a link and I don't know which 𝗔𝗯 initiated it, I don't know which validation function to execute. Right, so this is necessary. In the previous version, what we would have is something like entry address. And now there is this link at entry that basically contains all this information. So base, target, whatever. The problem with this is that this is basically an entry that that needs to be stored in the DHT, but it's a somewhere weird entry in that it cannot be updated. It can be deleted, but it's not the same as delete an entry. It's delete link. You couldn't add links to this entry because it's already a link. So it made some weird mental noise. So now with this, the header itself contains all the possible, all the necessary information. And I now receive the header, and I know what to attach to the entry metadata to make it work. The same with delete link, and the same with everything. With this, we are sacrificing that the headers don't look the same. Like there are some headers with these fields, there are some headers with these other fields, but that's basically, if you write some wrapper functions on top of that, which I think are over here, or maybe up, I don't know. Okay, yeah. If you write these wrapper functions in which you say entry data, if it's a create header, this is the entry data. If it's an update, whatever, then you pretty much have all you need. Does that answer your question?
If clearly you told me link is a header, yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Link exactly is kind of header.
Yeah. And actually the same, like you have all these header types. So the only things that are creating entries, I think it's here, down here. Yeah, the only things that can be entries are the application defined entry, a public key for an agent, because this is the same of last time. There is a public key, there is an entry for the public key of each agent, so you can link and do things from that entry already. Capability claim, capability grant, and in the future, Hedayat, I think you know a little bit about this, so multi-party pre-auth. these kind of things are the ones that would go here.
I have a question going back to validation. Is
Sure.
there anything right now to handle dependencies for validation?
Oh, good question. Yeah. So let's, yeah. Here we are returning an external result of validate link callback result. Oh, I think this contains, right? Yeah. So here we can return a result dependency.
Yes. Yes.
I'm happy to hear you react that way. So we have much more control on what we want to ask and so on. Here, this accepts a vector of DHT hashes, and actually the subconscious of Holochain is going to pick that up and say, okay, whenever this entry enters our cache or our system in some way, we will know that we have the necessary information for this validation to run. So we are going to retry it. Otherwise, we are going to retry it in a exponentially in an exponential backup manner, basically.
Mm-hmm. And in these
yeah,
unresolved dependencies, do I provide IDs of the entries? I mean, of the entries or of the elements?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know that. I think you
mm-hmm.
you can do whatever you want.
So
like
both.
Both, yeah, because this accepts a vector of any DHT hash, and any DHT hash is a union. Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, it can be entry of header, basically.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, I think
okay,
so.
Thank you.
Yeah, the other part of validation that I haven't really touched because it just right now getting merged. I don't think there is even a oh yeah, there is a validation package. Okay, so first time seeing this. No, okay. No, okay. So this is not yet properly merged, I think. The thing is that, so you know from the previous version of Holochain, a validation package is whatever you need from the person that committed the entry in order to validate the entry. So in the previous version, you could say things like, okay, validation package entry, which meant only the entry is needed to validate this entry. Validate package the source chain, which means I need the full source chain of this agent in order to validate this latest entry that the agent has committed. So what I think is happening here is that we are going to get the validation package more or less working the same as in the previous version. But in this callback manner as well. And I think we are going to get validation package entry calendar event as well. So with the callback with the entry IDs, because the validation package depends on the type of entry, right? So, but I think this is only stepped in, and just right now the work of validation package, I think, yeah, get validation package, this is still not merged. So, and actually it's pretty cool. If you want to go to the pull request, you can see all the work that Holochain core team is doing. So this is in place, let's say, for it to compile, but it's not actually called. Okay, anything else? What's there for anyone?
I think it's a lot of information, and
right.
There might be some questions, but later.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's just a lot to process.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. Oh, okay. If no one has questions or things that you want to drill into, I could talk about a new way of adding zones I discovered the other day was possible, because I think this will affect the way that we develop and publish zones. It's a little hacky, but it works, and I think it's worth it that you know that something like this is possible. Is that okay? Is that of interest? I think it could be for people.
I would be interested, but I'm concerned about the time limits.
Yeah, so this would be like the last thing that we do, but this is only if no one wants me to drill into anything else.
Well, I was a bit confused about whether we should think of apps as haps anymore, or the same way, or I'm not quite clear. So maybe you're about to sort of launch into that if you're talking about the publishing side.
Yeah, but I think like you're spot on, Martin. I think that's a good, very good thing to talk about. And I was just going to touch on that tangentially, so I think it's better to do it, but more abstractly. Let's not, or more head on. So, okay, here is what we have. As before, we have DNAs that are composed of multiple zones, right? So as before, also we have no DNA code. We have no layer in which we can inject code into the DNA because all the code is always coming from zones. Okay. Right, so we have it like this. Okay, so this is a DNA. Now, what we are calling apps, it's a bundle of DNAs. Okay, so all these can be thought of an app. Okay, so let's see. This is app. I want to, oh, come on. Okay, so just imagine it. So this is app one, let's say, whatever. And this is going to be more important in the future when we discuss things like conductor services, which are going to be like, okay, core functionalities that the conductor offers, like file system, source chain backup, deep key, those kind of things. And you will also be able, I think, this is what, the last thing I heard, you will also be able to refer from DNA to DNA by aliases. So let's say this is the an indexing DNA, this top one. From the bottom one, you will be able to say, hey, commit or have a bridge call to my indexing DNA. And then at the app level, you can define my indexing DNA is this top one. So it's going to be rerouted to the DNAs you are you are referring to as an alias. And now at this point, and I think moving forward, any UI stuff is out of the picture. Like the conductor cannot host any UI, so the applications you are installing in the conductor do not contain any UI stuff. Before, you could have that, and I think actually that's what Electron was using, but not anymore. Oh, and also, did we talk about Electron and what the new strategy for publishing would be in Holochain? No? Okay, awesome.
No, we didn't.
Perfect. I think this is a good important thing to finish with. So Electron is going to be discontinued. Oh, Electron, Holoscape. Holoscape is going to be discontinued. And its replacement will be some kind of binary that you install, and now you get into the system trace some holochain icon that you can just click and do some configuration maybe, and maybe even you have the list of installed applications there, and you click on them, and that takes you to a new page, a new tab, and that's the application UI. I don't know exactly, like I guess that that UI will live on a centralized server, or you could even host it on your own machine, but then this UI is going to connect to localhost, not some external server. So you're going to be connected to your conductor running in your machine. And I'm just
so
like,
the conductor,
I like it because it gives more flexibility to us, other than having to be sandboxed in a electron shell that defines a lot of things for you. Go, Martin.
Sorry, maybe I've misunderstood. Is the conductor running now a web server? Is that what you're saying?
No. So there will be, there will be, like, for you to get a UI connected to a Holochain conductor, you need to first run the Holochain conductor on your local machine, and then somehow to have a UI connected to that conductor, right? So that UI has to be hosted somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. So this is binary that does that. That's what you're saying, that you install for
like the binary I was talking about is the Holochain conductor, which just like executes the node on your local host. I don't know if they are going to do anything to support UI stuff, or just let anyone do their own thing. Like maybe I want to distribute my application as a progressive web app, so that you can just install it as a Chrome variant in your machine. Or maybe I want to deliver my own Electron shell, because this is an IDE or whatever. Or maybe, I don't know, like you can think of a lot of ways of doing this.
So the bottom line is, now there is a strict separation between the backend with the conductor and the way you host your user interface.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the things that it's like they are not there yet. They are finishing networking, and we'll see exactly this afternoon with the meeting with Art, exactly where we are at that. We are going to see how the exact details turn out to be for this.
I also have another question, going back to the scheme that you have open on your screen right now. So how is it different from what we had in previous version? I thought we also had the ability to define multiple DNAs, and then you would have some kind of name for each DNA, and then you would reference them. At least that's what I remembered reading from the bridge doc. So what are the details that are different?
Right. The most important thing is that now instances are referred by first of all, instances now are called cells. Okay.
An instance being an instance of DNA.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can have multiple cells for the same DNA running on a conductor, because you can have a DNA with a public key, and that's a cell basically. So if you imagine a holohost conductor, you will have the same DNA running for a lot of people, and every instance should have different properties, different source chain, different everything. So now the cell is identified by pair of DNA hash agent public key.
Oh,
And
so there is now a different level in identifying the DNAs.
not really. It's different than before. Like before, we had an arbitrary string that you said this instance ID whatever, but now that's removed and it's fixed. Like if you instantiate this DNA with this agent public key, you are going to have to call it with this pair of DNA hash public key and refer it like that.
I see. So now it makes it easier or completely possible to run the same DNA on the same conductor, which would be used by different people. And before it would have led to some kind of clash because different agents are trying to run the same DNA, and now it wouldn't.
No, because the previous version also accepted this, but it identified the instances with an arbitrary string, which like downstream would have made things quite difficult for an application to refer to each other.
Okay. Okay.
But you're right, it's not that different. It's just that now we have very clearly defined that an application is multiple DNAs installed. And if you want to become familiar with these kinds of things, I think the best thing to do is to visit the code of the replacement of 𝗔𝗯cie web client, which is Holochain Conductor API. And in here, there is no documentation yet, but in here you can see all the admin functions that are available: activate app, attach app, interface, deactivate app, whatever, generate agent pub key, install application. So yeah, you will have a much clearer picture of how you can interact with the admin conductor interface. This as the last version, you have to be careful because, for example, on Holo, you won't be able to contact the admin interface because that would be a very big security hole. And let's see how that process will look like on Holochain installed on localhost. I think there are going to be some changes here. Sid, you had something?
And I mean, there are a bunch of questions associated with Holo, so I don't know. I don't think they are RSM related.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll just ask, like, one, there was this confusion around, will the different nodes of a DNA, like some might be on Holo, some might be on Holochain, and that shouldn't be a problem, right? Like, I don't remember.
Right. Yeah, that's totally right. Yeah, that's the case. As far as Holochain goes, Holo is just running a conductor with lots of DNAs.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the same as if you are running a conductor with lots of DNAs in your computer for Holo.
Yeah.
No, sorry, for Holochain, for that network, it's going to be transparent, basically. It's going to be the same.
So the only difference is if I'm a Holo user, all my apps will be across holoports. Like they won't necessarily be on the same holoport. And so I think, that definitely creates problems for bridging between apps, because bridging won't be able to happen at my node. It has to, so in general, it has to happen on a Holochain node.
Not necessarily. You can define that this application depends on this other one,
and then it downloads the DNA, and then deep key. I remember that now.
And then the only thing that you have to do is say this agent here and this agent here are actually the same person.
Yeah. And hopefully deep key will do that for us.
Yeah, I think so. So I just want to acknowledge that we are 10 minutes more than the time schedule. I'm happy to keep going a little bit more, but I think like one important thing for me, because some people in the community have asked for it, is to actually drill down to what the core architecture looks like. And actually we have a schedule, we had scheduled that for this week, but we postponed it. So we could begin to do it next week, or do you think some high level, like these first 3 sessions, high level overview is still needed? Like, okay, let's okay, I'm going to do a check-in.
What do you mean by drill down though?
Yeah, so what I want to do eventually is actually go into how the core works. So going into crates, and okay, for this case, the important one is Holochain, and then the most important thing is that everything is organized around workflows, and these are all the workflows that exist in Holochain. What does each workflow do? How do they interact with each other? How do different components of the system interact with each other, and so on? And this will allow us to do 2 things, which I think is important. One, which I think are important. One is be able to contribute PRs, issues, and fixes to core, which right now it's much like 10x maybe more doable than in the previous version, because the code is much cleaner, simpler, and so on. And 2, like there were some people that wanted to do the Holochain Playground to collaborate on that, and for that, that's basically a requirement. So just for that. So okay, am I making myself clear on what I mean by core technical deep dive? Okay, so now the check-in. Here is, I want to continue doing what we are doing, and from the app development perspective, see what's changed, what's new, what we have to interact with. And here I want to go to how the core works. Where's everyone at? Okay. Okay. Right. So it
What do
seems
you
like
feel like doing?
I honestly want to drill down into the core already, but I feel like there are some questions unanswered yet, or some things that are not clear still from the app development perspective. But I don't know exactly what they are. So we could try to do it on the forum, for example, or once there is a question, we can try to communicate and get it solved. So I don't know. How do you feel?
Yeah, I think the forum. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that application development perspectives and core deep dives are not mutually exclusive. So we can do a couple of sessions with a deep dive into architecture, and then go back to the app development with more knowledge and a better system in place.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good idea, actually. So what we can do is next week we can begin with the core deep dive. I think it's a very interesting topic as well. And if you can, and you are interested in, and so on, you can try to scaffold the Zoom and try to build it, test it, and see what's out there. And in 2-3 weeks, we can do another application development perspective to catch up and see what territory all of you explored, and what needs to be answered, and so on. Does that sound like a good plan? Go, Jacob.
Yeah, great. it's an off-topic invite, so please, if anyone has still questions or anything, then go ahead, and I will just say this afterwards.
Okay.
On that note, if anyone here has had success or been able to install RSM on Mac, please let me know. I'm guessing most people here would be. Okay, I'll probably message you during the week.
Sure, no problem.
Awesome.
Awesome. I know that Thomas Cow also has done it, I think, and Connor.
Okay.
Great. So, anything else on RSM? Otherwise, I'm going to stop the recording. So, 3, 2, 1.